Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook. I'm delighted for this episode to be joined by guitarist Sharon Isbin, who I spoke to a couple of years ago. I'll put all the links in the show notes so you can hear that conversation if you're inspired by her playing. This time we're talking about her album Live in Aspen, which includes Sarod Masters, Amjad Ali Khan, Arman and Ayan Ali Bangash. I'm really looking forward to chatting with Sharon about this album. What you're listening to now is Romancing Earth, Ragapilu. And I hope you enjoy listening to this and then my conversation with Sharon. Thank you for joining me because I love this album and it's a kind of new departure for you, isn't it?
Well, I was very fortunate to have received an email about 15 years ago from Amjad Ali Khan. He's considered the foremost sarod virtuoso in the world, and he said he'd like to collaborate. So we met. I got to hear him and his amazing sons, Aman and Ayan Ali Bangash, in concert in New York, and said this would be fantastic, but there's one caveat. I need to have everything notated in classical guitar notation, then I can play it. And because they don't read music, it then took about 10 years for them to find the right collaborator who was skilled in both North Indian classical music, classical guitar, was a composer, improvised, played jazz, and could really put this all together.
Yeah, because they are very different things, aren't they? I mean, there is no notation.
No, and they have an oral tradition. They're actually, the Khans are now seventh generation with his sons in the not only performance on sarod, but also the evolution of the instrument itself. So it's a remarkable and royal lineage in a way, and I felt really very honored to be included in their fold and to join them in this very new project of combining the guitar with the sarod and tabla.
Yeah, and it sounds beautiful.
Well, thank you so much, Hilary, and I appreciate that you listened and that you are enthusiastic. There's such different instruments, as you know. The guitar, of course, has nylon strings, is played with the fingernails in the flesh, and has frets, whereas the sarod has no frets, so they can play any note and all the ones in between. They actually pluck the metal strings with a plectrum and use a couple of long fingernails on the left hand in order to press down on the fingerboard in order to create the actual pitches.
Ah, that's it. That's how they do it. I really like it. One of the things that I've struggled with on this podcast is that I tend to do classical or jazz, and there are all sorts of other types of music that have huge long traditions that I don't often get to hear, and this is just a wonderful opportunity to hear something different.
Well, thank you. And I felt that way when, after 10 years and I was convinced the project was never going to happen, all of a sudden all of these ragas appeared in my inbox, and I wrote back and I said, this is gorgeous music. And Amjad said, well, that's great because we've booked a tour to do with you throughout India in 2 months' time. And I said, well, that's exciting. Couldn't I have a little more time to assimilate all this and fit it into my schedule? And they said, nope, the halls were available, including Mumbai, Delhi, Calcutta. Let's do it. So I moved mountains. I loved the music so much. They had already become friends. And it was really a magnificent collaboration.
Yeah, it really is. So why was why was this album recorded in Aspen, Colorado?
Well, the first time that we played together was in India in 2019. And after that, we said we have to make an album. So 2 months later, they had one free day in New York. We created Strings for Peace that was released in 2020.
Right, yeah.
I get to work with students from all over the world who come to study with me. I get to invite guests. So I invited the Khans to join me along with Amit Kavthekar, our amazing tabla player, in our concert in 2020. We had a sold out show, fantastic audience, lots of very enthusiastic listeners, and it really fired us up. And a couple of months later, Ayan listened to the archival recording that they do for all their concerts, and he said, "My goodness, this is an album." I said, "Really?" So I listened and I said, "You're right." So it was really by accident. And because of that, it was really capturing the spontaneity of the moment. There was absolutely no self-consciousness because we had no idea we were making a recording.
Right.
And the genius of the people who were involved in the project, Wes Lanich, who was recording all of the archival albums, not albums, but the concerts, had done such a great job of different stems and different tracks for the different instruments, because there were 5 of us on stage, and we heard that, and there was no reason any of that should have worked with all of the equipment, but it did. And we sent off his master of all of that to our engineer in India, Sai Shravanam, who created the final master, and voila, this is live in Aspen.
Yeah. I can't express how fascinating it is to hear these different cultures coming together and working so well together.
Well, when you stop to think about the history of Spanish music and North Indian classical music, there's a connection that many people are not aware of. So hundreds of years ago, the Roma migrated from India, crossing the ocean to many lands, including establishing a group of people in Spain who became part of the flamenco movement in Andalusia several hundred years ago. And of course, that whole flamenco tradition inspired Spanish composers that we've all come to love, like Manuel de Falla, Enrique Granados, Isaac Albéniz, and Francisco Tárrega, which is the opening composer for solo guitar that I play on this album, a work of his called Capricho Árabe. He was a 19th century guitarist and composer. And if you go online to YouTube, for example, and you put one of those generously expressive side-by-sides of flamenco dancers next to North Indian classical dancers, and you'll see immediately how similar the gestures are, the rhythms, and the melismatic improvisations that happen. So you can actually feel viscerally those connections from a lineage of several hundred years.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, that's incredible. So at the beginning of the podcast, I'd like to play a bit of Romancing Earth because I really like that one. But then at this point in the podcast, I wanted to play a bit of Raga Bahar.
Yes.
So how did that one work when you were performing this on stage? How did that so I mean, I suppose what I'm trying to get to is how you combined the kind of classical, guitar with jazz, with improvising, with this other tradition. How did that all work on a practical level for a track like that?
Well, you'll hear a lot of improvisation that the sarod players engage in. And so every night that we play, it's completely different. And because we've done several years of touring, to just play this concert, we felt very free. So in the opening alap, which is kind of an expressive call to the cosmos, where the sarod players get their feel for the groove, and there's a call and response often between the guitar. And then when you hear the tabla enter, that's where the raga starts. And you'll hear the fast rhythms that really build and build until a very climactic ending. techniques that I use in order to speed up the playing that one would hear with a pick is I use the thumb and first finger together, almost like a combination back and forth pick. And there are lots of different colors that one can do on a nylon string classical guitar. Something that is by the bridge that is very bright, moving towards the fingerboard, very dolce and sensuous. And all of these different kinds of colors come and interact. When they're improvising, I'm improvising bass notes to join them. And because I never know what's going to happen next, especially in the slow sections, it's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And did it take you outside of your comfort zone a little?
Well, fortunately, I've had a background where for almost 20 years I performed with a marvelous Brazilian percussionist from the Amazon, Tiago de Mello. We made an album called Journey to the Amazon.
Yes, I've heard that. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. And for me, that meant that working with that kind of rhythmic accompaniment and collaboration was very natural. Also, I've had the pleasure of playing with people who improvise, like Steve Vai, the rock guitarist, or Joan Baez in the great folk icon of our world,
Yeah.
Romero Lubambo from Brazil with his incredible samba music, and Stanley Jordan, the jazz artist we've all come to love and
Yeah.
know. So for me, working with people who improvise was not a scary thing. It was something that I could actually say, okay, let's dive in and see what happens here.
Right.
And even the idea of embellishing, which is something that I found I needed to do because they're doing it, I was able to draw on, believe it or not, my 10 years of study with Rosalind Turek, the great Bach scholar and keyboard artist. And together we edited all the Bach lute suites, published them, and I recorded the complete Bach lute suite. So there's even a connection that goes back to the world of Bach when you're thinking about the idea of how do you embellish and create ornamentation that is really characteristic, in this case, of North Indian classical music. And yet that tradition of elaborating on notes is something too that I was familiar with.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's your versatility and your virtuosity, isn't it? That you're able to play around. Sorry, I don't mean to be dismissive, sort of playing around, but you're able to interpret different styles of music and respond to what you hear.
And what it all comes down to really is having confidence in the artists with whom I'm engaged. If I love their music and I trust that they have figured out a way to bring me into their world so that we can create something new and different that is a different world, that combination,
Yeah.
then I can fearlessly say yes to something I have no idea how I'm going to do it.
Right.
And by saying yes, of course, I'm committed to the project. It's almost like commissioning a composer. You might think, okay, I love Chris Rouse's music or John Coriano's music or Aaron Kernis or Lucas Foss, all of these folks who have written amazing pieces for me, Tan Dunn, and I'll ask them to write a work for me. I won't know what it's going to sound like or even if I'll like it, but somehow I trust in that process. I trust in the artist, and that really makes it all happen.
Yeah. Are there plans to repeat the live performance?
Well, we are constantly playing. We're
Oh, okay.
performing in San Francisco on a big series this January, and another big radio show here. So our ongoing collaboration will now be entering. Let's see if you call that's our 6th year together. So and we've done well over a couple of dozen concerts. So it's fun for us to see what is always new and different. And
Yeah.
and for me, of course, I'm doing other kinds of collaborations. I have a wonderful association with the Pacifica String Quartet. We did an album called Souvenirs of Spain and Italy that came out in 2019. You can guess by the title, Spanish and Italian music.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right now I'm working on a project that's I would characterize it as a Latin pop concerto. I premiered it both
Ah,
with the National Symphony Orchestra on their big Labor Day concert on the U.S. Capitol lawn and with the Miami Symphony. And it's written by Karen LeFrak, American composer who has spent half her time in Miami and half in New York City. And in Miami, inspired by the wonderful collection of different cultures that come there and share their spirit, their music with the community. And much of this is Latin inspired and also from Africa. So all of this is part of what's called the Miami Guitar Concerto. And I'll
wow.
be recording that next month, along with a couple of other works of Karen's for an all Karen LeFrak album. And this will come out sometime in 2025.
Wow. You
And I'll
are
be
a
bringing that to Aspen as well.
wow, you're a busy woman, Sharon.
Well, I have the opportunity and the luxury of being able to do what I love.
Yeah,
And that allows me to say yes to the things that inspire me and no to the things that don't.
that's amazing. That's and you've obviously, Grammy nominees, Grammy wins. Are any of your albums up for the Grammys this year?
Well, Live in Aspen will be. And
Oh, wow.
so that was submitted, and we'll find out exactly in which categories it will land next month.
Yeah,
And so, of course, that's like playing Russian roulette. You have no idea where anything's going to go. But the idea is you make music that you believe in and that you want to share with people and that people respond to and love. And that's really the centerpiece of
of course.
everything that we all do.
Yeah, of course. And the Grammys, I actually think in some ways they're more kind of signposts for audiences to discover things that they wouldn't have listened to otherwise.
Well, that's a good point. And just having that sanction and that approval by your
Exactly.
peers, it is something that opens a lot of doors. And when I won my first Grammy back in 2001, that was really an exciting thing because no classical guitarist had won one for 28 years. So it really opened an enormous number of possibilities for me to pursue my dreams and my visions.
Yeah. It's really lovely to see that success for somebody, and you keep breaking kind of not taboos exactly, but taking the classical guitar into different spheres.
Well, for me, it's it's all about a tremendous curiosity about people and responding to their music and their brilliant artistry. When I did these Strings for Peace album back in 2020, when it was also released at the same time of Affinity, an album that celebrated composers from 3 different continents that had composed music for me in world premiere recordings. And one of the centerpieces of that was a beautiful concerto that Chris Brubeck, the son of Dave Brubeck,
Yeah.
wrote for me. So there's always something that is unpredictable in terms of what will be next, because I think that's part of what keeps everything open and everything alive.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, I hope you come to the UK soon because I'd love to meet you in person and hear you play in
Well,
person.
thank you, Hillary. I would love that as well.
Yeah.
Are you based in London?
Very near, just 30 minutes outside.
Wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
I certainly have great admiration for what you do and for your dedication and devotion to bringing new sounds to your listening audience.
Thank you, because that's what I do it for. So thank you. So lovely to talk to you once again, and I no doubt will be talking to you again at some point.
Thank you, Hillary. It's a pleasure.
Lovely. That was a lovely conversation with Sharon. She is a true inspiration. I've also just noticed from the press release that I was sent that Sharon was on the cover of Acoustic Guitar magazine at the end of last year, at the end of 2023. She's the only classical guitarist ever featured on the cover in their 33-year history. I'll try and find a link to that. So what you're listening to now is Sacred Evening, Raga Yaman. I just find this album really interesting, and I think if nothing else today, we need to be sharing cultures. So I hope this is interesting, and I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Sharon Isbin. Have a very harmonious week. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.